That's a great question. I've been thinking about that for about a week. And even though I've been at it for 42 years, almost 42 years, I couldn't think of one specific instance where I embarrassed myself and would make for a funny story. So I'm not going to try to do that. What I will say is I would advise everybody to be self-deprecating whenever you can, not take yourself too seriously. When you do have an embarrassing moment, make sure you're the one laughing the loudest and the hardest, and just be vulnerable. Show your vulnerability, show that you're human, and just don't take yourself too seriously. And again, 42 years, I ought to have some embarrassing stories, but I just couldn't think of one. There are probably too many.
I have a question. I think you just gave great tips that I think all of us should adopt, but usually tips come from personal experience. So, was there a moment where maybe, I don't know, you laughed the hardest about yourself or something like that?
Well, first of all, at work, I'm an open book. So Monday mornings, back when we were in the office every day, now it's usually Tuesdays, everybody in the office knows what I did over the weekend. Everybody knows the funny stories, the mistakes I made, things that I was doing out in the yard, if it's the summer, how bad my golf game was, and I'm extremely self-deprecating when it comes to golf. So I think it's probably my Monday or Tuesday morning explanations of the weekend that are the most telling relative to me.
Oh, I love that. So let
We
me,
can we can center it on golf.
perfect. Do you want to share a handicap here or not, or is that too embarrassing?
Too embarrassing. Too embarrassing.
Well, hello
It
and
should be
welcome to
it should be
Skilled.
better.
Well, you're not retired yet, so there's time.
No, true.
Hello and welcome to Skilled, the podcast where we sit down with remarkable L&D and HR leaders to uncover the stories, strategies, and skills behind their success. I'm Karen Rosenfeld, joined by Growth Space's CEO, Omer Glass. Today's guest is Larry Ott. Larry is the Senior Vice President and CHRO at Cooper Standard. With over 40 years of experience in the automotive industry, Larry has held senior HR leadership roles at General Motors, Ally Financial, and Meritor Inc. At Cooper Standard, he provides strategic direction for the global HR and communication functions, driving employee engagement, talent development, and organizational effectiveness. He's also the co-founder of the Michigan Mobility Talent Consortium. Hello and welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you. Now that we've gotten very little taste of how embarrassing your golf game is, let's dive into something you do want to share. Your successes. I think everyone has, it doesn't matter if you have a 40-year career or a 14-year career, we all have the things that we're really proud of professionally. I would love for you to share something that stands out to you.
I think what stands out right now, and it's the good news is it's fairly recent, but when I joined Cooper Standard 11 and a half years ago, and I'm not affixing the blame to anyone, but from a talent perspective, there really was nothing. There were no processes. There were no definitions of high potential. We had a very weak performance management process, which was there, but it really wasn't utilized, and certainly not utilized for the right purposes. So with the help of a handful, what we call a small but mighty team of talent folks, we've crafted for the size of our company a very well defined approach to talent strategy and talent management. We've built what we call Cooper Standard University. We've created rigor and discipline in our performance management processes, and recently took a lot of waste and effort out of that process, in addition to system work, which makes it, in my opinion, the most lean performance management process I've ever seen. And I've probably experienced 10 in my career, 10 different processes. So we're very proud of that. We have a very good track record of internal fill at higher levels. So we build the talent pipeline very effectively. And I have the good fortune of working with a CEO, and I say with, although I work for him, but with him on this. I couldn't have a better partner in this area of the business than our CEO, who really takes it to heart. We have a couple touch points with the board every year where we talk about succession at the C-suite level, but then really talent management across the whole organization down into lower levels. So I'm very proud of the work that the team did. I'm far from saying that it was me. I had the good fortune of inheriting an open field, and then I at least was smart enough to take advantage of the open field.
Now you got me. Oh, sorry. No, no, but I think you got me intrigued, and probably our listeners, because if you build after building like a performance management processes, which is hard for everyone, I hear it all over. Can you share a bit more about what you did here differently? Why is it good? Kind of like to give us just the bits and bytes and like the flavor of what happened there.
Sure. Yeah, we used to have, back in the day, a 5-point rating scale. And we ultimately did away with that because, just too many gradations of rating. And people got hung up on numerical ratings. Inevitably, there were people negotiating their ratings because they knew we looked at ratings to try to assess how we did pay increases, bonus payouts, et cetera, promotions. So it really became a non-value added exercise. We did away with that and went to a 3-point system: exceeds, meets, and does not achieve, does not meet, whatever we called it. And then within that, we rated everybody on their goals on those 3-point scale, as well as our key capabilities. And then you would type in comments on all of those areas, the goals and the capabilities, and then put in a rating for goals, a rating for capabilities, and then an overall rating with more written words. So we spent a lot of time doing this. And in my case, it's this, two-fingered typist. So it was just very inefficient. It wasn't well received. Although I will say I've yet to see a performance management process that everybody loved. Sometimes they tolerate it, and maybe that's as far as you can get. But we took most of that typing out. We decided we were going to go to one rating, one set of comments, and that was it. Now, the success of this is based on whether you've got a feedback-rich environment. Because the last thing we told our leaders and our employees was, we expect you to sit down once a year and talk about this. What we expect is instantaneous and constant feedback. I think we've gotten a lot further down the road. Closing out 2024, performance management was the first year we used this abbreviated approach. We're putting together a team to further analyze it with some feedback from our employees for the out years. But in my opinion, it's as lean as you can possibly get. Feedback so far, anecdotally, has been very positive.
As you were putting sort of the university together, all of that, what were the metrics that were important to you as an organization? How did you know you were successful as you were building out these programs over the last, 11 years?
Yeah, within our Cooper Standard University, we've got functional colleges. So, and as an example, the HR college, I'm the dean of the HR college. And one of the metrics that we use is how many classes are taken. And probably a more important metric is the degree to which, and it's not really quantifiable, so to speak, the degree to which the respective functional leader embraces their college. We don't have colleges set up in every function because we've got some functional leaders who have decided it's not a priority for them. When I talk about it with our leaders, the way I try to explain it is, this is your way of crafting what you want the future of your workforce to look like. And what are the focus areas? Those are the things that you try to develop people relative to. And this is your way of doing that. If you don't do something, you're just kind of walking around in the dark and not influencing what the your functional workforce looks like, what they're capable of doing, what their competencies are. You're just not capable of doing it. So those aren't real hard quantifiable measures, but we use them to the best of our ability.
So just to put everything together, so you built a new performance management process and you built a university. And how do you connect them? Like eventually university, you talk about capabilities, right? And how good are people at specific capabilities you care about. And then I assume the university, one of its purposes is to bridge skill gaps, right? Capability gaps. So I wonder how did you, yeah, if you can elaborate on the university, you said it like functional focus, but kind of like how do you tie them in together so you have a continuous loop of improvement?
So that's a great question. The way I do it in HR and the way I encourage other leaders to do it is, I spend a lot of time with my direct reports, and I spend a lot of time in my management routines talking to a broad cross section of our functional workforce. And based on my observations, I've identified a few areas that I think, we need to be stronger in relative to HR. And I've got communications as well. And the two that I've picked are business acumen and quantitative capability, analytical capability. So the courses that we run through HR College that are available and in many cases mandated for all of our 200 HR people throughout the company are based on analytical ability and business acumen. When anybody in my team asks me what I look for relative to HR people, those are the two things that I talk about, starting with business acumen. And if you're not capable of understanding what the business is trying to achieve, then there's no way you can help. And I look for HR people to be business people first, HR people second. And our CEO sets a great example with all of the C-suite, and what he says to us, and I pass it on to my folks, is when you walk into the room for our senior leader meetings, I expect you to take your functional hat off and check it at the door. And that doesn't mean that you don't comment or represent during meetings, but first and foremost, you contribute to the business. When the meeting's over, you can pick up your hat on the way out, but it's really business first. So that's the way I've done it in HR, and I've encouraged other leaders to think about where you've got gaps. In some cases, you can look through performance reviews, and it's pretty clear cut where you might have, let's say in a technical area, technical gaps. So what are you going to create in your development processes to close those gaps? It's kind of as simple as that. Simple to say, simple maybe to understand, not always so simple to do.
And then I think the obvious question to ask is, yeah, it's simple, like the theory is simple, the execution is hard.
Correct.
How did you execute? So, okay, so you understand the skill gaps and then you focus your university, the courses on what matters, which is brilliant. Like the more focused you are, intentional you are, odds are you will be successful. Can you share a little bit about execution? So, like, how does it work at scale, right? Because you have different courses, different priorities, different focus areas. Who delivers the courses? Do you have any like small group component, a one-on-one component? Kind of like how the execution looks like.
Yeah, we partnered with an external source that really created a huge off-the-shelf um, list of courses, curriculum. So we did that, and we have in my small but mighty talent team, I have one training development guy who is in, and if he ever listens to this podcast, his head will go get really large, but he's outstanding. He's absolutely great. So for certain things that we want to tailor make to Cooper Standard, um, he helps us with that. But we were able to find a lot of things off the shelf, reasonably priced, And a lot of our focus is on leadership. And the dean of the leadership college is the CEO. So that's a little bit about the execution. And then from there, I'll be honest, it's just, again, back to the leader. I pay very close attention, and sometimes I ask for lists of people who didn't attend the courses. And I have a gauge of people within my function who I feel are strong when it comes to business acumen, and the ones I feel maybe who aren't. And when I see the folks who aren't in those two capabilities, and they're not attending the courses, it makes me scratch my head and question, does this person want to close the gap or not? Or are they what I would call a traditional personnel person? And that's what they were called when I started with GM 42 years ago. It was the personnel department. And the way you made your name was being great at executing the processes. There was never, that I can remember back then, any discussion of being a strategic partner and helping leaders, top leaders, run the business. So I hope that answers it.
That definitely does. First of all, I love that the CEO is also a dean, because to me that says that it's a very much like a learning culture. If you have faculty that, C-suite faculty that are actively involved. I also love that concept. But if you're ready, let's pivot over to the sort of less successful facets of your 40 plus year career. Do you have any examples of where you sort of did a swing and a miss?
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. I have plenty of those. I just don't think we have time. But I believe, I've always believed in experimentation and try things. What I tell folks is, try some different things. You're not going to destroy the recipe of Coca-Cola, trust me. So in my last company as the CHRO, the mistake I made in trying to build my service delivery model is what we call it. I made too many assumptions, and I had a very clear cut vision in my mind about what the HR business partner was there to do. And when I talk about the service delivery model, I see three components. I see the HR business partners, those are the strategic partners lined up with leaders. I see centers of expertise like talent, HRIS, total rewards, comp and ben, those types of things. And then I see business service. And, that's, for lack of a better term, the back office work, where you have trained experts who are efficient in what they do. They're very, very, very much responsible for the quality of the data that you've got in your HRIS. So you've really got those three pillars. And the one I was most focused on, based on my observations of the team there, was the HR business partner role. And again, I saw a little bit too much of, hey, this person's a great executor. I didn't see enough of, this person helps me run the business, and they're at the right hand. I had a leader back in GM who told me that his two most important people, they had to be good, were the right bower and the left bower, the head of HR and the head of finance. Those were the two most important. And I've never, ever forgotten that. And when I've seen HR partners who merely look at it as a administrative task and go to meetings with a pad of paper and spend all their time writing down things that they have to run out and do, as opposed to raising questions like, why is our inventory so high? Why this, why that? More strategic things. So I just made some assumptions. And the mistake I made was I assumed people understood what I was thinking, and I wasn't prescriptive enough, and I didn't build enough process to help people get there. So good news is I learned that lesson I did it entirely differently at Cooper Standard than I did at Meritor.
Karen just sent me an article by Josh Bersin. He quoted a very interesting fact that in 1992, only 0.5% of the CHROs in Fortune 1500 were the top five, like high salary, like executives. And
NEOs.
today, yeah, and today it's 13%. So it grew from 1992 to 2025 26 folds basically. And
Yep.
the reason why is because HR became much more strategic and connected to the business. Like most big business initiatives are centered around people. So yeah, I personally believe this trend will grow because of the things that you're sharing, and it's all the mindset of what is HR. And if you're looking at HR as in charge of making sure that the inventory is not high, then you're doing the right job. So
Well, I think, the other thing I tell, folks in my organization is you want to be described as a business person who works in HR. That's the way you want to be described. And, I spend a lot of time with all of the leaders at our company, the C-suite leaders, and typically, it's not typically about people issues per se. It might be leadership issues, and predominantly it's leadership issues, but it's not what people back in 1992 or 1983, for that matter, would have been focused on. I think it's the quickest way to get and maintain that seat at the table. I always get really frustrated when I hear CHROs ask me, they'll say, you seem to have a good relationship with your CEO. How did you get that? And how did you develop your seat at the table? And I tell them the same thing. If you have to ask that question, it means you're not doing any of the right things. And first and foremost is, again, understand what you're doing. When I interviewed with the CEO for this current position, and he still remembers this, and he tells the story. But we were talking about strategy, and I said, look, I tell my folks, and I believe this as well. If you're gonna memorize a strategy, let it be the business strategy. If you have a question about the HR strategy, look it up. And he has told that story in my presence probably 20 times. I meant it. It's what I meant. So I think HR leaders have to aspire to be described as a, business person who chose HR.
So I'm going to hazard a guess, but I'll let you answer the question. I think I know the answer. If you're looking back and telling yourself when you were first starting out in sort of senior HR positions, what skills you need to focus on, I would assume it's the business acumen skill set, but I'll let you tell
Yeah.
me what skills, if you could have told yourself, 15, 20 years ago, what to focus on, what would you have told yourself?
Well, I think 15 to 20 years ago, I was already very focused on this. At the beginning of my career, I think I had it figured out. I don't know what made me figure it out. I think I had a lot of training and education from a business perspective. Um, I was well schooled across the board, and I think I just understood that at the end of the day, if you don't understand what we do, then I'm not sure how you can contribute anything. Um, to me, it's as simple as that, and some key experiences that people need to have. If you're in a manufacturing company, go out and work on the floor. And it doesn't. I'm not necessarily talking about as an operator, as a direct labor. I'm talking as a first line supervisor. I did that for a very short time. I learned a lot in a very short time. I spent a number of years in the labor relations world at General Motors. And I tell people again, if you're in an organization where you have organized labor, then understand what that's all about. It's a huge component of the business. So I just, for whatever reason, I understood those experiences and the things that I should learn at a young age. That said, I had some great mentors and some people who kind of pointed me in the right direction. And I tell people I was at least smart enough to listen and follow in the right direction.
I love that because it's, becoming an excellent leader is not a given, but when you're sort of privileged enough to be surrounded by excellent leaders, when you're sort of coming up in the ranks, you can't help but sort of learn up and sort of emulate their great example. The hard part is when you don't have the great leaders to learn from.
Yeah. Well, and what I've said about that is learn from the bad ones. If nothing else, learn what you're not going to do when you become a leader. It's very, very, it can be very telling. And I had some who, in some cases, I think were just bad leaders. In other cases, I think they didn't have some of the experiences that I chose to have. So, therefore, they had a very narrow focus on what the business was. And this is back in the early days, my early days in General Motors. Some were great, and again, some were just too narrowly focused and didn't necessarily have the best advice for young people coming up.
And final question, what do you do? How do you help build great leaders? What is it that you sort of focus on?
I mentor a ton of people. Ton is it's an exaggeration. I mentor a lot of people, and I find that very helpful. The other thing is I'm a very transparent feedback provider. And I talk to senior folks in our company when I see something that I think is going to be an obstacle for them. I tell them. And I'm very, very frank. And what I've learned over the years is if you've built a level of trust with somebody such that you can give them feedback because they know you're trying to help them, then they accept and want more and they'll ask for more. So for me, it's actively mentoring people, and I mentor people at all levels throughout the company. We have a formal process that one of our employee resource groups built and champions, and every year I sign up for a couple more people, and the people I've had in the past, I tell them we can still talk. There's no sunset, clause on these mentoring relationships. And I think mentoring is a great way. And in the process of mentoring, tell stories. I've always, and my father was a great storyteller, just a fantastic storyteller and a great joke teller too. But I learned, I think, the importance of storytelling from him. And it's probably, I don't know, 10 years ago was the first time I read something about how storytelling is a very valuable leadership capability and it's one that ought to be utilized. I couldn't have been happier because I love telling stories. And, and I always kind of had this feeling, is this storytelling a waste of other people's time just because I enjoy it? And the research suggests otherwise. So mentoring and storytelling, I think, are two
Yeah.
things that I really use.
Well, we remember the stories. That's, years later, if I say one line from a fairy tale, you'll be able to tell me the entire story, right? That's the stuff that impacts us, especially when there's a
Yeah,
moral at the end, right? All of it. That's why
yeah.
that's why fairy tales exist, right? For the big moral fable. Yeah. Well, I have a question. So the mentorship, it's cross-functional. It's not just folks on the HR
Yes.
team. That's amazing.
And the way we do it is as a leader, and we have all of our director level and above, we strongly encourage everybody to mentor at least one person. So every year there's a request, who wants to sign up to be a mentor? And then on the other side, who wants to be mentored? And then we give people an opportunity to select, I think, the top three choices of who they would like to have as a mentor. And then, one person in that employee resource group has the job to put that puzzle together. And
We
I
do
feel
it. It's
bad
funny.
for
We do
her.
it with AI, but you have a
Yeah.
person who's like plugging it together. Wow.
Well, I got to tell you, that's probably, knowing her, that's probably what she'll do. She'll figure that out.
Do you measure anything against it, like the like whether it's voluntary attrition rates decreasing because of mentorship, or is it or not as formal as that?
Yeah, we measure a lot of things, and certainly voluntary, involuntary turnover. But I'm a little bit unique, I think, when it comes to HR leaders, in that I'm very, very careful to draw causal relationships or claim. We did this, so then this happened, so therefore this is the cause, because there's so many factors at play every single day. I mean, our focus on development and the employees' 51% responsibility for their own development. Certainly mentoring, feedback, experiential development, coursework, there are all these factors. So it's really kind of difficult to say, here's the net effect of mentoring. Um, it is, though, interesting, and I don't have numbers at hand. It is interesting to see how many of that leadership group that I defined, directors and above, which includes plant managers, how many people sign up every year. That tells me a lot. Um, I don't view mentoring as a nice to do as a leader. I don't view it as a nice to have. I view it as a requirement. And it's a leader's ability to give back, um, for what you've been given. And, most of us have had the benefit of mentors throughout the course of our career. So why don't you give back?
I mean, that's an amazing sentiment. I'm happy to end the conversation there. Thank you so much. This was awesome.